Greetings and welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. We're continuing with our coverage of California State Prisons. Corcoran opened up in 1988 in Kings County, California. The facility is located just below the newer California Substance Abuse Treatment Facility, from here on referred to as SATF, and is also sometimes referred to as Corcoran 2. In this video, I will first cover the main Corcoran facility and then include some information on SATF. I remember the California State Prison at Corcoran very clearly because many of the hardcore prison gang members we had at Folsom were moved to the new security housing unit there post-1987. Corcoran is a very large complex that includes several separate facilities and has a long, violent, and problematic history. In August 1996, the Los Angeles Times claimed that Corcoran was the most troubled out of all the 32 state prisons. They noted that at the time, Corcoran officers had shot and killed more inmates than any prison in the country, and this was only after 8 years of operation. 7 inmates had been killed and 50 others seriously wounded. Furthermore, the article alleged that officers and their supervisors staged fights between inmates during what were called Gladiator days. In November of that same year, a CBS evening news broadcast showed video footage of an inmate fatally shot by a guard in 1994. This death spawned a probe by the FBI into alleged inmate abuses by guards.
2 years ago, we first reported the story of California's prison system, the nation's largest. And one prison there in particular, Corcoran State Prison, where the FBI was investigating numerous corrections officers, prison guards, who'd been accused of staging inmate fights, sometimes wagering on the outcome, and then when those fights got out of control, of shooting the inmates involved. Since Corcoran opened 10 years ago, more than 30 inmates had been shot, 8 of them shot dead during those fights. The California Senate has been looking into that violence since our first report, and they have come to a sad conclusion. But we begin tonight with our original story. Most of the fighting and the shooting of prisoners has occurred in Corcoran's Special Security Housing Unit, the SHU, a prison within the prison that is set aside for difficult inmates, violent inmates, from throughout the California prison system. Lieutenant Steve Rigg was a supervisor at Corcoran.
We've had inmates killed when it could have been avoided, and now I think it's just a cover-up.
Since Corcoran Prison opened in 1988, guards there have killed 8 inmates and wounded scores of others, more than any other prison in the country. Why were so many inmates getting shot at Corcoran? First, the California Department of Correction is the only major prison system in the country where the guards are armed inside all the prison housing areas. And for years, its regulations called for an integrated exercise yard policy. But if you put feuding inmates, blacks and whites, Latinos, rival gang members, into small exercise yards like this one in the SHU, it's bound to lead to violence.
And if you put them on the yard together, they're going to fight, either through hatred or through peer pressure. They're going to fight.
According to both prison guards and inmates, staged battles, gladiator fights, complete with betting, became a regular entertainment at Corcoran. Matches were set up by selecting inmates from rival gangs, from a SHU cell block like this one, and then releasing them one by one into the SHU yard. At least one Corcoran supervisor reportedly amused himself by calling the fights like a ring announcer.
And that's where most of the shootings took place also.
Officer Richard Caruso worked at Corcoran with Lieutenant Steve Rigg.
My superiors sometimes called down to the control booth and asked, "Are you going to have a yard fight?" And the staff told them, "Yes, we are." And they were told, the staff were told, "Hold the yard up. I have a new secretary that just got on board here at Corcoran. I want to bring her down and show her the Corcoran way." And when they brought her into the control booth to show off the fighting, the gunner was told to let him fight a little bit, for she can basically get impressed.
In 1995, Officer Caruso and Lieutenant Rigg, after being rebuffed by their prison warden and by superiors in Sacramento, decided to go to the FBI to try to put a stop to what they considered the guards' barbaric acts. One such incident involved inmate Preston Tate. He was in prison for rape, and in the SHU for allegedly attacking a guard. In April of 1994, Tate was shot dead in the SHU exercise yard by a guard who used a 9mm rifle. Anthony James was with Preston Tate that deadly day in the SHU yard, And James says that once the guards sent in these two Hispanic inmates, those men entering on the right, he knew they were going to have to fight.
You saw them coming across to you, and it was apparent that there was a fight that was about to begin. Couldn't they have stopped it?
Yes. The guard would have hollered, "Get down." We would have got down because really nobody wanted to get shot.
During the fight, wooden blocks from a riot gun were fired. Anthony James was hit, and he moved off to the left. And then within seconds, the fatal shot followed from a rifle loaded with an exploding bullet.
It happened so fast. At this point, Tate, he done been shot in the head.
James says that Preston Tate told him that a guard had vowed that he would never leave the shoe alive because he, Tate, had assaulted another staff member.
Was there ever any verbal warning to the two of you or the four of you down there fighting?
Nah.
Do you believe this was a setup?
It had to be.
After the shooting, the videotape shows the guards coming in and hauling out Tate's dead body.
Was Preston Tate murdered?
In my opinion, after reviewing everything that I've reviewed, being told everything I've been told, I think he was murdered, yes.
But in this press release, the day of the Tate shooting, the prison said that Preston Tate was killed because, quote, Tate refused to obey the numerous orders of the yard officer to stop his aggression on another inmate. Afterward, a review board of prison officials issued this report justifying the killing of Tate as a so-called good shot. Quote, the shooting was within department policy.
There was no weapon. It was not a life-threatening situation. There was no serious bodily injury. And to have the shooting review board review all this evidence and clear this shooting is sickening.
March of 1997, an episode of CBS 60 Minutes discussed the 1994 death and alleged that there was a cover-up, an alarming number of shootings at the prison that were suspicious. The California Department of Corrections issued its own results of its investigation in November 1997, which found that there were isolated incidents of staff misconduct, no widespread staff conspiracy to abuse prisoners. A film titled Maximum Security University, which used multiple prison surveillance tapes showing 4 fights between 1989 and 1993, which ended when guards fatally shot combatants, was released in February 1998. That same month, 8 California correctional officers and supervisors were indicted on federal criminal civil rights charges in connection with fights that occurred at Corcoran Prison in 1994. After a trial, the 8 men were acquitted of all charges in June of 2000. Now, just because they were found not guilty does not necessarily mean they committed no wrongdoing. It just means that the jury could not find they were guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Eddie Myers was deputy director of the California Department of Corrections, the man in day-to-day command of California's prisons.
How could it have been a good shoot? Tate was not the aggressor. Tate didn't have a weapon. And it was a good shoot.
Tate was not the intended target of the shot. The officer intended to save Tate's life. It's unfortunate that Tate was hit.
And the shot just went wrong.
He missed.
Who was he supposed to be shooting?
One of the 2 people that were on top of Tate.
He was supposed to be shooting one of the 2 Hispanics?
Yes, sir.
How many bad shoots have there been by the review board?
I don't have the exact number. I could get that.
And he did. And it turned out there had been 0 bad shoots. In effect, the Prison Shooting Review Board justified every one of the shootings at Corcoran. But that is by no means what an independent commission set up by the California Senate said late last year. They found that 24 of the 31 serious or fatal shootings at Corcoran were simply unwarranted. But since our first report was broadcast back in 1997, we've learned of yet another kind of brutality that California prison guards committed against inmates. Rape. Not by the guards, but by other inmates used by the guards to retaliate against prisoners who had gotten out of line.
Did you also say this, quote,
The details of the so-called state-sanctioned rape became clearer during a special hearing on prison violence last summer by the California State Senate.
whether it's correct or not?
A hearing attended by Senator Quentin Kopp.
The Department of Corrections was willing to allow at Corcoran State Prison those conditions to exist in which a prison inmate was encouraged knowingly to commit rape against another inmate and get away with it.
Case in point, Wayne Robertson, a convicted murderer and known sexual predator. He's nicknamed the Booty Bandit. Investigators say he raped at least 15 inmates, many of whom were thrown in his cell for punishment. Meet number 16, Eddie Dillard. He's out of prison now and has started a family, but back in 1993, Dillard was serving time for assault with a deadly weapon when he got into a fight with a female officer. For punishment, the guards at Corcoran State Prison locked Dillard up in a cell with Robertson.
He gets mad and tries to strike me. We start fighting in the cell.
Start fighting in the cell?
Yeah.
You at 120 pounds and he at 220?
It's really not no fight. It's really him tossing me around the cell.
And
he like wrestles me down. He's trying to like pull at my underwear. And you know, I'm like, nah, and I'm hollering for the COs, kicking on the door. Nobody never come and just leave me in there.
Over a period of 3 days, Robertson raped Dillard twice and tried once to force him into oral sex.
How can you expect for a person to be subjected to that type of cruelty and then expect them to come out back into society and be productive after being scarred like that?
In fact, the Dillard case might have been ignored if not for two important developments. First, a blistering report published last July in the Los Angeles Times, an article that described the state's investigation into prison violence as a whitewash. And the second was former corrections officer Roscoe Pondexter, nicknamed the Bone Crusher. 2 years after he was forced to resign for excessive violence at Corcoran State, a repentant Pondexter has gone public, admitting just how cruel he had become.
I became insensitive, callous, uncaring, numb.
what was Roscoe Pondexter's role in this whole episode?
Having knowledge of and having me go to him and inform him of what was going on.
And he said?
There's nothing he can do. He didn't do nothing. That was obvious.
Maybe I was in denial, or maybe I didn't really care unless he came out and told me that I am being raped specifically by him, but I don't think that he came at me and told me specific words. I am being raped by Robertson.
By ignoring Dillard's pleas, Pondexter maintained what he calls a code of silence.
After the incident happened, all of us sitting down and writing reports together so we could be consistent. I was very much part of that.
Today, Pondexter says he wished he might have done things differently.
If I had to do it back over again, I would have separated the inmates, and I wouldn't care if the Department of Corrections got mad at me, or if I broke the code of silence at that point. What I think that would happen to Eddie Dillard was absolutely wrong.
Dillard is suing several of the correctional staff members, some of whom have been indicted by the California Attorney General. But Dillard is not suing Roscoe Pondexter, whom he has forgiven for the things he did. What happened to Dillard and to those 8 inmates who were shot dead went on because few guards like Roscoe Pondexter have come forward, and it's not difficult to understand why. Consider what happened to the 2 former corrections officers, Steve Riggs and Richard Caruso. Since appearing on 60 Minutes as whistleblowers back in 1997, their lives have been made miserable. They've been made outcasts by many of their former co-workers, and they've received death threats.
They succeeded. We're retired. We can no longer report misconduct by the Department of Corrections. They succeeded.
The moral of the story, therefore,
The moral of the story is the Department of Corrections procedures and people in it were rotten. And the system was so rotten as to punish the people who want to be honest and who want to act like they're supposed to in upholding the laws of the state of California. It's a very sorry commentary on the Department of Corrections.
Very sorry commentary on the state of California.
Indeed it is.
Gladiator fights or rooster fights, putting up the best fighters against other good fighters and then betting on them, did in fact occur, according to several of my sources, both former convicts and staff, in spite of CDC and other sources claiming that this never happened. For instance, my lieutenant in New Folsom Violence Control Unit, who was no softie and was always very professional, even during his supervision of cell extractions, which we did many of, using force, told me that it was off the hook there. He said, Gabe, they were beating guys down right off the bus for no reason. He soon asked for a transfer from Corcoran, seeing bad things coming down the pike, but also noticed that some in the administration seemed to support this brutality. Former CDC staff member DJ Vodica wrote a book about some of this called The Green Wall. Prison guards struggled to expose the code of silence in the largest prison system in the United States. In addition to working at Corcoran, Vodica worked at Calipatria, Pelican Bay, Salinas Valley State Prison, and Pleasant Valley State Prison, all maximum security facilities, which have all been accused of having members of the Green Wall Gang. DJ was also part of the Investigative Services Unit, Internal Affairs, responsible for looking into misconduct by staff, and testified in front of a California Senate committee investigating corruption and abuse of force within the California Department of Corrections. As a result of his testimony, legislators presented 2 new state bills to protect whistleblowers from reprisal or retaliation, which he states he in fact faced. I tried to get him on the show here, but he stated that his lawyer told him that he should no longer do interviews, as he was still in litigation on some cases. Maybe he'll change his mind one day, especially after he hears this series. As I've stated in several of my other videos, there always was corrupt staff at any facility where I worked. However, the vast majority that I saw were very hardworking and professional. And I know a lot of times these things are hard to prove, as individuals of that mindset tend to cover each other's asses and only do it on a watch where they know a supervisor will also back them up. So again, I believe the profession should not be smeared by the actions of a select, corrupt, and sometimes sadistic few. As with many cases, CDC would often rather settle out of court than go to trial. What often happens in cases of staff misconduct that are upheld are that they are given union protections and the case against them is highly scrutinized. Then they're often given a deal to take a letter of instruction or reprimand about an incident or incidents. They may be forced to take a small cut in pay and or transfer to another facility or face the threat of greater disciplinary measures. Those letters are kept in a staff member's personnel file, but removed after 1 year. Other than that staff member not being able to promote during that 1-year time period, many feel it is just a slap on the wrist. As part of a 1999 case, California paid out several large settlements for incidents at Corcoran, including a $2.2 million settlement to inmate Vincent Tulumas, who was paralyzed for life in a May 1993 shooting, and $825,000 to the family of inmate Preston Tate, who was killed in April 1994 at the facility. So, I hate to leave you hanging, but I'll be back soon for part 2, Corcoran State Prison and SATF. Now, this is Gabe Morales signing off. Gangsters, cops, and politicians.